Ready for a deep dive into a topic that's got history, faith, and, yeah, whole lot of controversy.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about the Third Temple, ancient prophecies, geopolitical tension, you name it.
And we're going to try to unpack it all.
We are. So where do we even start with something like this?
Well, I think the best place to begin is with the Temple Mount itself.
Okay, yeah, Jerusalem.
Exactly.
Not just some random piece of land, is it?
Not at all. This is a place that's been fought over for centuries, millennia even.
Right. First and second temples both destroyed. That's some heavy history.
It is. The first temple, built by Solomon.
Oh, yeah, I know about that one.
It was a powerful symbol for the Jewish people. I mean, can you imagine? Centuries of worship centered on that spot.
Wow.
And then the Babylonians come in and destroy it in 587 BCE.
Talk about a turning point.
You said it! But even then, they rebuilt.
The second temple, right?
Yep. And that lasted until 70 CE when the Romans destroyed it.
Man, that's just, it's crazy to think about.
It really is.
But that wasn't the end of the story, was it? There's this whole concept of a third temple.
Right, and this is where it gets even more interesting.
It's not just some far-fetched idea. It's like deeply rooted in Jewish tradition.
It is. You have prophets talking about it. It's a core belief in Orthodox Judaism.
A crucial part of the Messianic age, right?
Yeah, the coming of the Messiah. Think about that for a second. This belief has shaped Jewish thought for centuries.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we get to the Bar Kokhba revolt,
Right.
I mean, talk about bold. They actually tried to rebuild the temple.
They did. They actually got permission from the Romans at first. Can you believe that?
No way.
Yeah, but then the Romans changed their minds.
Oh, that's asking for trouble. And that's when things kicked off.
That's right. Simon Bar Kokhba led the revolt. And get this, they actually held Jerusalem for a while. Even started building.
No way. They were that close.
They were. But it didn't last. The Romans crushed the revolt, renamed the city Aelia Capitolina, and the Jews were forbidden from entering.
Except for one day a year.
Right.
Wow, that's incredible. And that was it, right? No more attempts after that.
Oh, there were a couple more.
Seriously.
Yeah. Emperor Julian, the one who tried to revive paganism, he actually gave the Jews permission to try again.
Wait, are you serious? I never knew that.
Oh, yeah, it's a fascinating story. So they start building, and according to accounts from that time, there were these unexplained fires, even an earthquake, some say.
Whoa. Divine intervention or maybe sabotage?
Who knows? But either way, that was the end of that attempt.
Wow. Talk about a historical roller coaster. You'd think that would be the end of it, but it wasn't, was it?
And not even close.
Yeah.
Fast forward a few centuries to the Sassanid Empire. When they pushed the Byzantines out of the Middle East, the Jews briefly regained control of Jerusalem and restarted animal sacrifices.
So they were actually making real progress this time.
It seemed like it, but it was sadly short-lived. The Byzantines took back the city, and the Persians, well, let's just say they weren't too kind to the temple site.
What happened? What did they do?
They turned it into a garbage dump.
You're kidding.
It's true, and that's how things stayed until the Muslim conquest of the region.
Okay, so this is where Islam enters the picture in a major way. How did that change the fate of the Temple Mount?
The Muslim conquest was a seismic shift. There's this fascinating Armenian chronicle from that time that mentions the Jews making another attempt to rebuild the temple. But this time, they were stopped by the Arabs, who then built the Dome of the Rock on the site.
So the Dome of the Rock, a major Islamic holy site, is built right on top of where the previous temple stood. I can see how that would create some tension.
Absolutely. It's a recipe for conflict, especially given the religious significance of the site for both faiths. The Dome of the Rock is considered the third holiest site in Islam, you see.
And that brings us to today, with the Temple Mount at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So much history is embedded in this one place. What are the different perspectives today on the Temple Mount and the idea of a third temple?
Right. It's a situation where you have two peoples with deep-rooted historical and religious claims to the same piece of land, which makes it incredibly volatile.
I can only imagine.
You have Orthodox Jews who see rebuilding the temple as a fundamental part of their faith, with some groups even actively preparing for it.
It's like they're saying, we're ready to rebuild right here, right now. That's intense.
It really is. And then you have other branches of Judaism, like conservative Judaism, who believe in a Messiah and a rebuilt temple, but without the animal sacrifices. Reform Judaism, on the other hand, doesn't believe in a rebuilt temple at all.
So even within Judaism, there's no single viewpoint on what should happen. That's important to understand. We've covered the Jewish perspective, but what about Christians? How do they view the Third Temple?
It's interesting because there are a few different takes within Christianity. You have some groups, like dispensationalists, who see the Third Temple as a key part of end-time prophecy.
So for them, it's not a question of if, but when it will be rebuilt.
Exactly. They connect it to the second coming of Christ, seeing it as a sign of the end times. It's a very literal interpretation of biblical prophecy.
Wow, that's pretty different from what other Christian groups believe, right?
Absolutely. Many Christians, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, even some Protestants, see Jesus himself as the fulfillment of the temple prophecy. They believe he is the ultimate temple, the ultimate sacrifice, which makes a third physical temple unnecessary.
Okay, I see. Different interpretations of what the temple ultimately represents. We've talked about Jewish and Christian perspectives, but what about Muslims? We can't ignore their viewpoint.
You're absolutely right. We can't. For the vast majority of Muslims, the Temple Mount is sacred ground. They see the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock as holy places and strongly oppose any attempts to rebuild the temple there.
And for them, it's a purely Muslim site, right?
Exactly. Any Jewish claim to the Temple Mount is seen as unacceptable, and that's one of the biggest sticking points in this whole debate.
Wow, we've got all these different faiths, each with their own claims to this site, their own interpretations of its history and what it means to them. It's like a knot that's been tightened over centuries with no easy way to untangle it.
That's a great way to put it. It's incredibly complex. And it's not just about religion either. It's deeply political, too.
It absolutely is. But before we get into the political side of things, there's one more group we need to bring into this conversation, the Baha'i faith. They have a fascinating take on the Third Temple, don't they?
They do. The Baha'i view is that the prophecy of the Third Temple wasn't about a physical building at all. They believe it was fulfilled with the coming of Baha'u'llah, the founder of their faith.
So they see him as a kind of living temple.
Exactly. They believe his writings are the real temple, a spiritual one that transcends physical limitations.
Okay, so we've gone from ancient kings and Roman emperors to modern-day geopolitical conflicts and spiritual interpretations of what a temple even means. It's a lot to process.
This deep dive has taken us on quite a journey, that's for sure. But it really highlights how deeply history, faith, and politics are intertwined in this one place.
It really does. And it makes you think about the nature of sacred spaces. What makes a place holy? Is it a physical structure, a set of beliefs, or something more?
That's a question worth pondering. And ultimately, can we find a way to navigate these competing claims with respect and understanding? Is it possible to share these spaces in a way that honors everyone's beliefs? That's the challenge we're left with.
Some serious food for thought. Well, that was our deep dive on the Third Temple. A huge thanks to you for breaking down such a complex and fascinating topic.
My pleasure. It's always a good day when we can explore these big questions together.
And all you listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey through history, faith, and controversy. Until next time, keep those minds hungry for knowledge. It's almost like you can feel the weight of history there, right?
Absolutely. Thousands of years, all converging on this one spot.
It's incredible. Okay, so we've talked history, we've talked faith, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room, can we?
I'm guessing you're talking about the political side of all this.
Exactly. Because, let's be real, the Third Temple isn't just a religious debate, is it?
Not at all. The Temple Mount is at the heart of one of the most complex geopolitical conflicts in the world.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, to be exact.
Right. Both sides have very strong claims to that land.
And both see it as absolutely central to their identity.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole thing so volatile.
Because it's not just about religious beliefs anymore. It's about land, about sovereignty, about who gets to tell their story.
It's all of that and more.
So where do we go from here? Is there any way forward, any hope for resolution?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
I guess it is.
You have some people who believe that building the Third Temple would actually help resolve the conflict.
Like, it would force some kind of solution?
Exactly.
But then you have others who believe it would just make things worse.
Oh, absolutely. It could easily escalate. Tensions lead to more violence.
It's a real dilemma. Because on the one hand, you have this desire for peace, for understanding, right?
Right.
But on the other hand, you have these deeply held beliefs, these claims to the land that go back centuries.
And neither side is willing to back down.
It's tough. So what do you think? Is there any way to find a solution that respects everyone's beliefs?
It's a tough one. Some people believe that sharing the space is the only way forward.
Like finding a way for both Jews and Muslims to worship there peacefully?
Exactly.
That would be incredible, but I don't know how realistic that is.
It would require a lot of compromise, a lot of trust.
And that's kind of in short supply right now, isn't it?
You could say that, but there are others who believe that the answer lies in something more spiritual.
What do you mean?
Like, maybe the focus shouldn't be on rebuilding a physical temple at all,
Oh, interesting.
but on building bridges of understanding, of peace.
Focusing on the things that unite us rather than the things that divide us.
Exactly. It's a nice thought, isn't it?
It is. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it for today. This has been, well, it's been quite the journey, to say the least.
It really has. We've covered a lot of ground, literally and figuratively.
We have, from ancient kings and Roman emperors to modern-day conflicts and spiritual reflections.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? But hey, that's the thing about history, isn't it? Yeah. It's always there, waiting to be explored.
And reinterpreted.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe someday the story of the Third Temple will have a different ending.
One that's a little less about conflict and a little more about hope.
Now that's an ending I think we can all get behind. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure as always.
Likewise.
And to all you listeners out there, keep asking the big questions. Keep searching for those answers. And until next time, keep those minds hungry for knowledge.